And to kind of set things up with a couple questions here, I shared with some of my peers that are technology companies that are doing startups. And while a lot of us don't depend on necessarily a physical retail space,
Right.
retail for us was going to conferences. It was it was spending time there, and that's gone too. And so a lot of us are trying to figure out how do we serve our customers, and a lot of that's over video. So Brett, I'm excited to welcome you. I know you've got a lot of history, and I do want to talk about the hot ones because
Okay.
that is one of my favorite YouTube shows. But I want to kind of ask you a little bit. Tell me how you got interested, and how did you get into TV?
Yeah, at the time I thought it was just normal, but when I was 8, literally, I would spend my Sundays watching the NFL Today on CBS, and then I would watch 60 Minutes. And somehow between those two, I figured that's what I want to do. I just kind of knew it then. I didn't know what exactly I was going to do or how to go about it. But then at 8, it kind of became something that was planted in my head. And once I got to high school, it was my sophomore year, and I had a teacher that kind of thought I was a handful and needed an outlet. And he recommended me to the speech coach. And then that changed everything for me. It showed me a pathway that I could do well in front of people in a room, or eventually a camera or behind a mic or whatever. And then that kind of set it off. So yeah, I thought every 8-year-old knew what they wanted to do when they were 8, but I was very lucky in that sense.
That's awesome. Now, back to speech a little bit. You still help with speech at your high school alma mater
I
part
do.
time.
Yeah.
How did that come about? It was just something you were inspired to do.
When I was starting, our head coach saw some potential in me, and she had an alum who had graduated and was at the university, and he had done really well. So she called him and said, "Hey, can you come out here and work with this kid I've got?" And he did that all the rest of my high school years. For 3 years, he came out and worked and helped me, learn how to compete, learn how to be a better speaker. Somebody who could own the room is something that I coach our kids to do. So it was just something that really helped spring me forward. And I always thought, once I moved back to Nebraska, and I left shortly after high school graduation, and I was gone for 22 years, I always thought if I came back and the opportunity was there, I was going to give back. And so I moved back here in April of 2012 from San Antonio. And one of the first things I did is I called a buddy of mine who is still very involved with the high school out there. And I said, "Hey, who's coaching the speech team?" And he said, "Well, actually, it's a teacher that we've had here for a long time, but she just got handed it. She's never coached speech. I'm sure she would love the help." And Tammy made him and I hit it off right away. And that first couple of years, I took a couple students, and our team was really small. Like Malcolm has a really good speech history. When I was competing, we'd win conference and district every other year. Wouldn't do a lot at state. A few years after I graduated, we had a coach who came in and took them to the next level, and they won like 5 straight state titles. So that was like a thing to me when I was seeing, even when I was away. I was like, we can do that here. That's a possibility. So we started small. I think we had 14 kids our first year. Now we're at 35. We opted up to Class B. Were districts to take place this year, we've been the first activity or program in our school's history to compete in Class B, and I think we would have contended for some hardware at Kearney. So that was just me wanting to give back. And then, when you do those type of things, when you put yourself into that fold and you think I'm going to give back, I don't think I ever really considered like how much I was going to get in return. And so it's just kind of this loop that now feeds itself that, yeah, I'm there for the kids and I'm helping develop them and grow them into being, competitive, competent young speakers. But also I get so much from that in watching them grow and develop. And so, yeah, it's just something that I'm really blessed to be able to do. And I love Malcolm, and it gave me so much. So it just gives me endless amount of joy to be able to give back to them.
That's awesome. So, I know that that's been a passion of yours to give to the arts and to give to speech. I also have to confess that we share an interest in one of my favorite YouTube shows, The Hot Ones, and you got to host it.
I did. I'm the only. I'd say I'm the only normie that's ever been on Hot Ones. I'm the only guest they've ever had that doesn't have a Wikipedia page. But yeah, that was, there's so many things that can be rough about social media and putting yourself out there or being involved, and that's been nothing but a blessing. The first time I saw it was Key and Peele, and I think that was like maybe their 17th episode. And then but I was immediately taken with Sean Evans, the host. I think
Yes.
I came at it from a TV producer thing, and I'm like, who is this guy? Because he was really comfortable, which is, I mean, Key and Peele are huge stars.
Right.
And he was really comfortable, really confident, knew his stuff, but was also like warm and entertaining and engaging. So I went back and I binged like the first 16 episodes and got caught up. And then I started these power rankings, which is more or less just kind of amuse myself. And, ranking 10 guests out of 17 isn't hard. But then it just kind of grew. And then the thing with Russell Brand happened where he improvised an entire song to me so that he could be on top of the rankings. And then it just kind of went next level from there. And eventually, when they hit 1 million subscribers on YouTube, which they're now at like more than 9 million, they said, hey, we want to celebrate, want to have you out here, and we're going to flip the tables, and you get to interview Sean. And so I did, and it was great, and it's fun, and that's been another really, kind of blessing on my life. I mean, it's my daughter. My daughter, she always just kind of like rolls her eyes and grumbles like when somebody says, "Oh my God, Brett Baker," which honestly, my kids like to say, "Oh, I'm famous," and my speech kids. I'm like, no, I'm internet famous to a very specific demo of 19 to 26-year-old dudes. That's it. Those are always the ones who recognize me. But I do appreciate it, and I've enjoyed every bit of it. It's gone way further than I ever thought it could have.
Well, I've appreciated the show and watching the way that Sean conducts an interview. Like you said, he knows his stuff, but he's also preparing for the next step almost
Yeah.
every time. How do you get to that level? What has he done to get to that level?
It takes a lot of work. I would liken it to what Peyton Manning is famous for, studying film and just being an absolute student of the game. I know that Sean and his crew at First We Feast and Hot Ones, I know they do the same exact thing. Like they spend a lot of time doing research and knowing, how to come at a guest from an angle that they're probably not going to get 95% of the other places they go to. So it's as with everything in this business, it's all the work that you do ahead of time before that moment.
Well, that's what we want to talk to you about today.
Sure.
We want to understand. I think for many of us, in some ways, doing this show right now, I'm an amateur producer in
Yeah.
figuring this out, and there's nobody else here. I mean, it's just me, sort of scheduling this out. And now I've got a team that creates all the graphics and does all of the social media things behind us, but as far as figuring out how we conduct an interview, how we put a show together, what makes it interesting, all of that sort of work, I'm a complete amateur at doing this. And so I thought it'd be great for me to get to learn this, but also to really help all of these other people figure out, hey, how do we help produce that? So what do you think when you're putting together a show? What are the things that you start to think about in putting together a typical show?
It starts with really like the fundamentals. For me, like I said, 60 Minutes is one of my, it's one of my Bibles. HBO Real Sports is one of my Bibles. And just from like a way it's shot, it's fundamentals. It's, wide, medium, close, close. And those are, three different types of shots. But in an editing sequence, they, give the viewer the picture of what's there, and then you take them in, and then you get a little bit more detail. So it's always about fundamentals. It's like, okay, let's start here, and then we go here, and then we go here. And it always also, it depends on the kind of resources you have. You don't want to young producers get into a lot of trouble by trying to do stuff that either they're not familiar with doing, or they don't have the resources to do properly, or the folks that they depend on to execute it, like a technical director, maybe don't have the knowledge to execute it. So first, make sure your fundamentals are always covered, and that's That's the basics. Because if you start there, you're always going to have a good, clean product, and you're going to have something that people are going to come away. The ideal goal is that, they come away and they take away your message instead of remembering, well, that shot was kind of crazy, or what were they doing with the music and the editing there. If you start with the fundamentals, so that really they don't notice anything about the production value, then I think you're winning. Because the worst thing is shaky camera, weird angles, bad lighting, all that kind of stuff. If you get the basics down, and there's plenty of resources available all over the place to find those, and it's simple. I mean, you're doing a great job. You're centered up on the camera, and this is funny. So when people use a cell phone, often you see them looking at the screen, looking at themselves, which is weird. But I put a little Post-it note with an arrow under the camera, so I remember to look at the camera and not the screen. That's a little thing. If you ever watch Casey Neistat, that's really why he wears dark sunglasses, because he doesn't want you to see his eyes looking at the screen, because he's more comfortable with that. He never looks straight at the camera. So that's why he wears the darks. Yeah, exactly. But so it's little things like that. God is in the details, I guess, is the saying. So if you're always paying attention to the basic level stuff, then you can start to build and grow, and your confidence as a producer and a storyteller is going to grow, and you're going to be willing to take some more risks and challenges, because I've got the base built. Once that base is built, then we can go from there.
Interesting. My wife's obviously on your show, and she critiqued me on one of my first Facebook lives like this, because I'm looking for the comment section, which for me,
right,
I can kind of look at you and you're pretty close to that camera, but over in the comments section, I'm trying to kind of feed those and start to learn some of those lessons. So when you say the fundamentals, you sort of are saying camera angles, lighting, sound quality.
Yep.
And what would be sort of a next step in figuring out, how do I put together the content idea? How do I think of a show? So this is something that we sort of struggle with as amateurs, to think of, like, I know that I want to interview Brett Baker. I kind of have some ideas on where we want to go, but how do I put that together? How do I put together a 30-minute show?
I think the easiest way to do it is to find somebody or some show whose work that you like and you'd like to emulate, and copy them. Eventually you're going to find your own voice. It's kind of like jazz. Like, maybe you start off on the same notes, but then you're gonna take it your own place. So find somebody whose work that you like, and you're like, that connects with me. I'm going to try to do that. And then from there, you're going to grow. One of my favorite movies is called Finding Forrester. It's with Sean Connery. And he's teaching a young man who's learning how to write, how to, like, one of his rules is, on the first draft, you don't think, you just write. And the kid's having a hard time getting going. So he gives him a paragraph from something that he wrote. And then the kid jumps off on that. And it's kind of the same thing. If you're like looking at a show or somebody's product, you're like, that's how I want our message to come across. Find an example and say, okay, I'm going to copy that now. And it doesn't have to be a shot for shot, Gus Van Sant's Psycho remake, which nobody wants to see again. But that gives you the framework then. Then you're not like coming at it from like, okay, I just have a blank canvas and this is overwhelming and I don't know where to go. Find that show. And then there's a lot of great content on YouTube right now that I think is probably like a better place than, like, say, network TV or local TV to start. Find something whose work connects with you, understand why it connects with you, and then try to copy that. And then you're going to build off and find your own voice.
So I love that example. One of the books, if you come over on my coffee table, we've had this on our coffee table for a couple of years, is the book called Steal Like an Artist. I don't know if you've ever read that book.
I've not. I love it.
It is a fantastic coffee table book, and it's just all about how we get all of our inspiration from the world around us, and it's not new. So I love that concept. When we think about it, and I think about a 30-minute show, if I think of when you're producing 10, 11 News, or if I'm thinking about the way you create maybe a story for a 30-minute story, it's broken up. And this is something that, as an amateur, I don't always think about. I think of, hey, we're going to spend maybe an hour together today, but you have different segments throughout the show. How do you break up a show?
Well, first, in the TV business, it starts with sales. How many commercial breaks do we have? How long are those commercial breaks? Then it starts with, then it goes to like metrics. So you've got to figure out, okay, how long can we keep the audience past? So you've heard of Nielsen ratings. We now
Mhm.
use something called ComScore, but it's basically the same thing. You want to keep your audience past a certain point on the clock so you get full credit for having that share of the audience. So none of that is going to come into play for like if you're producing, internet content. But those are the things that we think about. The next thing you think about is, okay, who's your audience? Well, for the 5, 6, 10 o'clock news, it's not going to be the same as Pure Nebraska. Pure Nebraska is a great show that we have that John and Taryn and Brad Anderson do a ton of work
Fantastic.
on. But it would not work as the evening news because it's the pace is more slow. It's more deliberate. They take their time. They let a lot of things breathe. News, we've got to be fast. So it starts with tempo and pace. I try to get my reporters to stick to when they cut a package, a minute 15. They'll usually, squeeze out a minute 25 or a minute 30. And I'm like, okay, but just so you know, when you go to that next market up, when you jump to an Omaha or an Austin or wherever you go next, you're going to have to be at a minute 15 because it's all about tempo and pace. And then it's how do I keep the shot changing? What do I don't want to have the same shot with my anchors, more than twice, other than the standard 2 shot. So I want to have Billy at an array, or I want to have Jennifer at a monitor, or a virtual screen. I mean, these are all different set elements we have, but I want to make sure that the viewer doesn't see the same thing 2 or 3 times in one segment. You want to keep that fresh and moving, and it's really just it's tempo and pace. We slug each element, figure out what element you have, give it a time frame, and then try to stick to that. So if we just have like a piece of video, a soundbite, and some video after that, that's a VOSAT. I book 25 seconds for each, 50 seconds overall. If we can go less, all the better. So then you can get even more in your show. So it's all about pacing, tempo, and just really packing in that content for a newscast. So that's how we do that. I don't know that works for every single other kind of project because like Pure Nebraska, there's different things, but that gives you an idea of okay, I want this to move. So you have to make it move and then stick to your own rules.
Hmm. I like that. And Reverend Sean or Dylan here says, "Hey, there's sort of a progression to a show, right? When Sean was doing his show originally, it
Right.
was pretty amateur.
Yeah.
If you go back in the
The
original
early ones.
views,
Yep.
right? But all of a sudden, he got a production crew, and things started to pick up. Um, well, maybe someday we'll have a production crew here too. But for now, I'm at home, and this is what we get. Um, I like those. I like those comments. One of the other ones we had, my friend Mitch Fisher says, "What's the most important component when it comes to engaging your audience?"
It has to be the content. I think if you believe in it and it's something you're passionate about and you can connect with, I think that everything else will flow from there. That'll spark your ideas. That'll spark your passion. That'll spark you to like want to put this on the best platform possible. So I think it all starts with the content. If it's something that you're kind of iffy on, unless somebody's writing you a big check, you know, maybe find something else. But I think it all starts with the content. And my last 10 years, 12 years before I was here, I was producing sports. So when I came here, it was the first time I really had dipped into news. So I had to kind of learn and become passionate about the news, which I had never really been, but I, am better at now. But it's the content, so you have to appreciate and understand and really want to put that out there on the best kind of platform available.
Hmm. Yeah, great advice. So when we think about that type of content that you're passionate about, that you want to put together, when I first started, the means that I sort of became comfortable with in a professional setting were webinars. They're kind of funny. I still do webinars. I have one scheduled tomorrow. But I actually reached out to one of the producers over at KFOR. When I was early on, I did a webinar and I was bored. Like I was bored at my own webinar and I was embarrassed about the content that I produced. So kind of like I reached out to you, I reached out to him and I said, hey, I don't know how to make this interesting. And he said, the first thing he said, well, I don't know anything about webinars. And I said, well, that's fine. Just think of it as radio. And then I've got some slides that sort of run over here.
Sure.
And the funny thing was, he told me the first thing he said was, okay, so what's your format? And I said, well, it's me talking for like 45 minutes. And he said, well, nobody would do that. Like
Right.
that's a terrible format. And so I think of how we sort of edit from there as a business person sort of doing that. It was very clear to him that it was a terrible format. Um, how do you feel about switching up the format? What is a format that works for an interview style, and what would you do to make it more interesting?
Live works great for interviews. I think, if you can, I always think that's kind of the best way to go, because then you're going to get people giving that true, that they're not holding anything back. So I always think that's kind of like the step to go to there. So if we did, when Nebraska was playing up in Omaha for the National Volleyball Championship, I produced that show pregame, and it was way different than our newscast, because I knew because we advertised for it, hopefully we're getting a little bit different audience, more sports centric. And so I could tap into my sports background there, but it was definitely much different than how we would format a regular newscast. I didn't need to have, 3 or 4 stories before we got to Ken Chimick with First Look. I don't even know if we did First Look that night. We might have just done all volleyball in the A block. But in that A block, then, I started out with like a little music video that I kind of put together, find some good tunes and some good sound bites, and you cut those, and that gets people into the show. And then what I want to do is I want to show, where are we live? Well, we're here in the studio. We got somebody down in the rail yard. We've got Kevin Suits and Bridget Fargen up at Omaha, and I want the audience to see everybody who's live. So now before they even start who all we're going to show. And then you start going through them. First, let's go where the action is. So let's go to Kevin and Bridget. What's happening there? What do you see? What are you hearing? This just happened 15 minutes ago. We send in the video. Here's the video of the team arriving. That kind of thing. All right, we get a few minutes with them. Then let's go to another rail yard. What are fans think? What are fans doing? So that you think about, okay, it's the same newscast. It's the 5 or 6 o'clock newscast, but we're going to do it totally differently for the moment. So always kind of think about what that event is that you're covering, and then allow that to dictate your format, because I certainly wouldn't do the same 6 on a Wednesday that I would do on a Saturday before a national championship semifinal.
So what you're kind of doing is bringing an interest level where it's not consistent throughout the broadcast.
Probably,
right?
yeah. I mean, you lead with your good stuff, the lighter stuff, and you have to understand what does my audience need, what do they want, what do I want them to take away from this, and prioritize that, and then say, okay, I have other information, but it's not as important. And then you'd slide that back. So always lead with your good stuff. There are times, like if you look at Entertainment Tonight, the one thing Entertainment Tonight and Inside Edition they do really, really well is they tease stories ahead. Their teases are often much more interesting than the actual story that they're teasing, but you stuck around for 25 minutes to watch the entire thing because that tease was so good. So there is a way to make that work. Like you can back in something that's that good, because if you're like, well, I want them to stick around for the full 30, let me give them little snippets here and there. So again, that's like in the format. Like, how are you going to use that content? How are you going to use that material to best serve your audience and give them what you hope they take away from it?
No, that's a great suggestion that we don't often do in the business scene, right? Like you're not often thinking about how it's going to look 30 minutes from now, but we're
Right.
not used to competing with Netflix. We're not used to competing with all of this online streaming platforms, but now we are. You know.
Yeah. It's an undeniable fact, and there's going to be more. I mean, it's not like there's going to be less. So it's something that, if you want to hook people, that's what it's going to take. I have certain shows that I know I'm just, all right, I'm going to put down the phone and the devices, and I'm going to watch. Last Week Tonight with John Oliver is one that I'm like, okay, just sit down and absorb it all because it's so good. Usually The Daily Show is kind of like that. They've got a little rougher go of it now because they're doing it from Trevor's condo or apartment. But yeah, that's kind of like the jumping off point there.
So the other thing I want to talk about is when we are now producing content. I happen to be talking to a webcam right now. If I'm to watch, John Oliver or a national broadcast right now, clearly they're not using the built-in webcam. Maybe they're using something a little bit nicer, but they it's definitely not like $100,000 setup. They're not in a studio. They might have a ring light or something, but it's not like overproduced. What are the little tips that we could be doing to sort of ramp up this setting that I'm doing right now?
Well, the one great thing is with all this advanced technology is that it's more affordable than ever before to give yourself tools to make a great product. One company that I use a lot is called Iographer, and this was started by a guy who was a media teacher in high schools, and one day he had like 60, 70 kids that he was supposed to be teaching, and he had 3 cameras. And he's like, well, how is this going to work? So he came up with this rig called the Iographer and now he's got many different versions that you could pop your phone into, and my phone is on one right now, and it gives it a good, hard, sturdy frame. But you can put it on a tripod, you can put lights on it, you can put microphones on it. So when I talk about fundamentals, those are the fundamentals. Have a good camera. Well, iPhones have excellent cameras now. So that is a great starting point before, say, maybe you go buy that new high-end DSLR camera, which, if you're going to use it and put it to work, I would highly recommend, but that's a pricey step. So it's kind of like, learning to ride a motorcycle or drive a car. You're not going to start out with the top of the line stuff. You kind of want the lower end stuff so you can beat it up and figure out and learn what you're doing. But what you're doing, some of the things I'm looking at right there with your shot, you've got a light behind you. That's good. It gives a little depth, a little background, so it makes you pop a little bit more. I would say maybe get that camera up a little bit. You kind of want the lens to be on eye level. We see a lot of stuff, where people are like this or like this when they're shooting, either off their webcam or their phone. Think about how it looks on something that you watch and enjoy. So like I said, like 60 Minutes, even the evening news. Get that camera, if you're talking to somebody, eye level. Because that's how we talk to people. That's how we look at each other. We don't look at each other like, hey, how are you doing? I mean, unless, we're talking to, the San Antonio Spurs or something. In which case, by the way, we have step stools. So, and that helps you with the crush, but it also helps you get up on eye level with them so that your content, it doesn't look like he's looking down on you. Bald spot there. But again, it's just there's so many guides out there. 3-point lighting is really easy. I've got I have 3 lights on right now that just kind of help fill the room and give the picture, the shape and the color that it needs to look good. And those are all. I have hold on. This is my gear bag. It's really no bigger than a shoebox, but 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that thing would have been a trunk. And I can put lavalier microphones, I can put stick microphones, I can put lights, I can put everything in there, and I can carry that into anywhere and be ready to go and shoot. And you're using good gear I probably bought all my stuff for less than $500. You're using good gear to get the best picture, and then that's always going to be the great place to start, because when you sit down to either edit or you want to push it out there, as long as you're starting with good gear and you know how to effectively use it, that's going to elevate whatever you're trying to put out there.
Nice. Well, yeah, actually, in one of our webinars tomorrow, we're going to be talking about Switcher and how to
And
put those
that's,
together.
yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, I've done a couple podcasts and stuff where they record them too. And like, Jiminy Christmas, they have a studio in their basement at a reasonable cost. So yeah, that's one of the great things about right now is it's never been more affordable or accessible. You don't have to find, oh, this little company in Vermont that makes exactly what we're looking for, and they're the only ones. Now there's so much stuff everywhere that it's easy to get your hands on. And two, I would recommend, when we start, looking at the gear, borrow. Find friends who are using stuff. Say, hey, can I borrow this for a shoot? Can I, the first time I used a GoPro, I borrowed it from somebody. I'm like, do I really want to make that investment?
Yeah.
And that, should be like, yeah, that's a good camera. That, like, you can do so much stuff with that. So it's nice to be able to get your hands on it and get a feel for it before you pop for that money. So I'd recommend that too. Like if you have friends, or ask for trials. Like if you're working with something a little higher end, call a company and say, hey, I don't know if this is really what I want to get into. Can I get a trial? How does that work? The worst they can do is say no. So I would always recommend that get good gear. And again, it can be your phone. Start with your phone. That's a great place to start. And then just use it. And it's like writing. Like it probably took me 20 years to become a good writer. And it's the same thing with shooting and editing. You just got to do it a lot. And once you do, and once you find your rhythm and your work style, you're going to find your voice, and then that's going to show up in all of your work.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And we did have Katrina here asks a question about external microphones. Obviously, we've sat on podcasts where all of a sudden you hear amateur quality and it just doesn't work well. So those are tricky. But what would be your recommendations?
It depends on what you're using it for. There are stick mics. There you go. Here, let's see. Hold on. So I have in my bag. This is a Rode Micro, and this plugs right into my iPhone. And it's a great microphone. Rode is a quality company. They make broadcast, television network quality gear, and this is pretty affordable and it's great. It's in the I only got the one hand available, but it's in the fuzzy cat, we call it. But a great microphone. But then two, and so that's like if you want to catch nat sounds, or if you could get your camera up close and into somebody, that sound is going to be really good picking up from a shotgun microphone. Let me see here. I have in here is my wireless lavalier set.
There you go.
Wireless mic. So then you can clip that, put that on someone. Keep digging in my bag here.
We have
this
is
wireless. A stick mic.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, we use a wireless
really
Rode too.
Yeah. And if you I would always recommend not using the camera microphone if you can. If you have to use the camera microphone, get as close as possible, because the gear in there knows, okay, I can limit some of that outside stuff and just pick this stuff. It's not going to peak you unless you're somewhere where it's a football game or a race or something where it's loud. You can get in close with the phone mic and it'll be fine. But if you can, always find get a microphone. I mean, even this just this works better than anything else that's comes with the phone. So it's going to give you good, clean sound, and that's one direction to start in. But I'd always say, yeah, if you can put a good mic on your phone, do it. iOgrapher again, and I don't even get paid by them, but they have great tutorials like how to shoot sound, shoot with sound or for sound. So that's a jumping off point right there, I would say.
Cool. Now, we shoot and we try to use kind of different mics, shotgun versus kind of like those lavaliers. If you can be corded, they're really cheap. They're like $15 for one of those corded ones.
Yeah.
So that's pretty slick. So
and
tell
use
us
it
about
beforehand, practice with it.
Yeah. So tell us about multiple camera angles. When we're thinking about, an interview like this, obviously we're just kind of going back and forth, but it would be interesting, like if I go back to the Hot Ones, right? I love that they sort of like shoot one person, then flip to the other, then sort of back out. It's kind of hard to do in this format, but if we were going to shoot that, how would we be thinking about that?
Again, it's the same kind of thing as like the lighting is okay. Let me think about the shot, how it's lining up. The biggest mistake people make is called crossing kind of action. Whereas all of a sudden you're both like, you don't want the interview subject and the interviewee looking in the same direction. You want to make sure they're heads to heads. Like you don't want one camera on his side and then the other camera on the other side. Both cameras are on the same side, just pointed to different places. So think about, yeah, how that's going to look, how it's going to edit together. Can I envision that? And one thing too, though, if you do shoot it wrong, you can always it's digital now, so you can just put a flop on the video. You could flip it, make it look right, as long as there's not like Be Social. If that was backwards behind you, that would look very odd. There you go. But yeah, so just kind of like be thinking about, okay, how's it going to look? How am I going to edit all of this together? And it's again, there's guides out there for setting up a 2-camera shoot, a 3-camera shoot. And I think you're like, yeah, with Hot Ones, they have one that gets the wide shot, and then they have one that's focused on shot, one that's focused on the guest. There are switchers now that if you have a good enough DSLR camera, you can program that switcher, and we're even getting some at work, that like it will, the image coming in, it will separate that image, and like you hit a button, boom, and it's got a bend tight shot. Then you hit another button, boom, then it's back to a 2-shot. And then you hit another button, and it goes to the guest. And that's one camera. So you can, and I don't know what the name of that is. One of the guys' podcast I was on, they had it. I thought it was really cool. I've seen that we're getting some of those at work. Again, I don't know what it's called, but then you're turning one camera into 3. So there are options. So like instead of buying 2 more cameras, maybe you buy yourself that cool switcher, and you have a nicer camera, and then that allows you to do some extra things. So there's different ways to get it done. It's whatever works in your budget, whatever you have access to. And then go online. There's a video for everything on YouTube. That'll help get you started.
Yeah, well, I actually filmed a little short one with my iPhone. You know, I have a newer iPhone, and now that it has multiple cameras, there's a couple apps that you can get that actually use all of them at the same time. So I can shoot wide and close up at the same time, and it records that video for me. So now I sort of have 2 shots that you can overlap. It's super cool. The other thing we do at home is when Amber's cooking and wants to do a cooking show, we have a GoPro that hangs from our ceiling in the kitchen, and so she can do the overhead shot, and then at the same time we can pull out a DSLR. So cool.
Which is great. I mean, you're really maximizing your material there. That's all.
Yeah, not super expensive. So talk to us about when you're going out, right? So we're kind of, a lot of these setups are studio-based setups, but you're also sending people out into the field to capture some video. What are you looking for when you're advising a reporter out in the field, who oftentimes now they're a reporter and a videographer is the same person? What are you advising them to look for? What are you advising them to think about when they're setting up a shot?
Well, everything, we always tell them this, you should have your story written in your head before you leave the newsroom. That way, then, again, you have a jumping off point. You have a place to start. So think about what you want before you walk out the door. Then once you're outdoors, it's the same. Again, it'll always go back to fundamentals. Shoot on a tripod if you can. And if you can't shoot on a tripod, brace yourself against something, or find something to, brace your camera on, because a steady shot is what you really want, unless, you're going for the NYPD Blue, shaky cam thing. But tripods, you can't use them off. Tripods are our friends. Zooming, the best zoom lens is your legs. Walk up close to a subject. One of the weird things now is, like, everybody takes pictures and they're like 7.5 feet away, and this was even before social distancing. And I'm like, no, a good picture is close. Get up close. Get us close. We're hanging out, and we want to mark the moment. get close. Your legs are the best zoom lens that you own. So always get as close as you can to capture those images. And then sound. How are you going to capture the sound? Is it a camera mic? Does that work in that situation? Do you need a shotgun? Do you need a lav? Think about that. And then use those effectively. And it always, hook everything up, do a check, plug everything in, give it a test, give it a listen back. Okay, because there's nothing worse than shooting everything and you're like, oh, crushed it. Then you go home and you have no sound. What happened? So always check your setups, check everything before you leave. And then light is the next thing. Is it a sunny day out? Well, if it's a sunny day, then you probably don't need to take anything. A little overcast, maybe take a top light. If you're going to be doing something indoors in a big space, if you have lights, take them. They're always going to, it's better to have something and not use it than, need it and not have it. But always think about kind of like, okay, what environment I'm going to go in? What am I doing this? Obviously I wouldn't send somebody to, a high school football game with a light kit because they don't need it. They're going to be shooting from the sidelines. So always kind of think about what it is we're shooting. What do I need to make that look the best? And again, that's always going to go back to your fundamentals: tripod, mic, your sound, and light.
Awesome. You mentioned tripods. I had a couple shout outs about gimbals as well. I actually have an iPhone gimbal, one of those Osmos. Super cool. I can rotate around. Obviously for production setup like you guys have, you're not shooting on an iPhone. But yeah, pretty cool stuff.
And again, really affordable. There's a bunch of different kinds. Osmo is probably one of the leading ones out there, but it's super affordable. 125 bucks will buy you a really nice gimbal, and your stuff, it looks like, holy smokes, they were on a dolly or they had a jib, and it just really smooths out the shot. So yeah, it's another tool. And if you can put that in your toolbox, go for it.
Have you watched any of the videos they did a behind the scenes Apple did when they shot those videos, the shot on the iPhone commercials? I don't know if you've seen the behind the scenes, but they did this epic snowball fight where the kids are throwing a snowball.
Yeah.
And then at the very end, you have this person who looks like they're just going to get murdered by a snowball. And then all of a sudden they have somebody come, this girl comes and just, decks this guy with a snowball. Well, it's sort of this epic scene, but the people that produced it are the same ones who are producing a lot of the epic movies. And so they started to go through and say, well, here's what we used. And they had, tens of thousands of dollars worth of gimbals and different equipment to run that video through. But yeah, it was kind of cool to see that the actual camera was an iPhone, but they still had a lot of tricks in there.
For sure. People make movies, full-length movies on an iPhone. So if your gear's good enough, even if it's a camera phone, it'll work. And like I say, so like I have a couple of my iPhones I haven't traded in. So I have those, and I will set those up as secondary cameras. So like I can have that wide shot of Bill Shammer and Bill Moose talking. And it's that wide studio kind of shot, and all I got to do is rip that video off because I just plugged in the camera, let it roll, and you never touch it. But it gives kind of that nice overview look, and that's a piece of hardware that would just be sitting in a desk drawer if I didn't put it to work. So if you like, they're not going to give you a good trade in on your cell phone, maybe think about keeping it, because boom, there's another camera that you can add to your toolbox that'll help you tell stories.
Oh, that's a great thought. Well, and I think about the events that you might be shooting. If you're a business person, and you're kind of trying to cover, hey, here's what's going on. It'd be great to have another camera sitting out there, even for a live stream like this. I could have 4 more cameras in this 100%. Setup, and I could be toggling between those if I figured out how to do it.
Had another body there.
Cool. Now, we mentioned at the beginning that you are an award-winning TV producer, and Dylan threw out a question here. What is your crowning jewel from your awards? Obviously, you've done a lot in your field, a lot of different TV work.
The Emmys are nice. It took a long time. I was in my 40s when I won my first one. At KSAT, we did a lot of great work, and we were the #1 station in San Antonio, Texas. But that wasn't something that the station put any emphasis on. We got a new news director a few years back, and that was something that she put. And so when they say your name, and it shouldn't probably feel like it does, because doing the work and being a storyteller and providing information to your community that they need is important, and I do feel good about that, and I feel that 1011 does a great job of that. However, there's a lot of long days. There's a lot of stuff that you got to go through, and especially if you're like me and you slave over a 6-frame edit, which sounds ridiculous to say, but it could take 30 minutes or something just to get it exactly the way it is in my mind's eye. Then you go up there and you grab that pretty lady, and it's okay, a lot of that was worth it. I think it would have been our third. We've won 4 best newscasts in the Heartland region, small market. And the third one I think was for an awful day. It was for a day when the state executed somebody for the first time in more than 20 years. And I was a little conflicted about that. But Bill Shammert said, on a day when it was important for us to be at our best, we were, and we served our audience that way. And so for me, maybe it's that one. Because we always put kind of the name or the theme of the show. And on that one, I just put the date, because I'm well, I don't want to put the execution of. So we put the date. So, but when Bill put it that way, that kind of maybe elevated that one a little bit more above the others. So, yeah, the Emmys are certainly nice. I'd probably trade a couple of them in for a state championship at Malcolm, but that would be the next one that we're really working hard for, and that I hope we bring home one day.
That's awesome. Well, I share your passion for working with high school students. As you know, we work with a lot of high school students with Class Intercom, and I really get excited about just watching the way that they create content. And what do you see when you're working with young people in speech or in front of a camera for the first time? What's the thing that just drives that forward for you to see? How do you help unlock that for students?
Show them what's possible. I think a lot of time it's super intimidating I run the clock at Malcolm's football games, and our kids now, we're on Strive, and so I'll lean over and I'll look at their shot, and it's this crazy wide shot, and the football players are really small, and they're saying you got to keep it somewhat wide, in case it's a long pass or something. I'm no, here, tighten this up, go here, do that. Because it's something that, I just hadn't thought about. You just get that picture up, because they're we got to be broadcasted, and we have to be on. You have time. You're going to give your viewers a better picture. So just slow down, get that shot. And I'll see them shoot, they'll do a podcast / video, that goes out to everybody in school, and tons of headroom, and the person is really small and the shot is huge. I'm no, get closer, bring them in, because that's how you're going to connect with your audience. So it's just push them past the intimidating part, and show them that it's not really that intimidating if you just take that first step. So that's always kind of the first goal, the first hurdle, is to get them to understand that they are more than able to do what's being asked of them, and that it's not scary, and that the challenge is the parts that are scary. That's the fun part. For a long time, when I first started producing live newscasts, I'll never forget, the first week I came home, and every day it felt like an elephant had been sitting on my chest all day. And I'm oh my God, this is what producing live TV is like. There's no way I'm going to survive for a year, let alone, now we're going on, 20, 30 years. And, but you get over that hump, and you become comfortable with it. And then you learn to own that. And then it's not so intimidating. The stress level goes down, and then that allows them to really kind of tap into their talents and put their flavor and spin on whatever, either it's a speech, or if they're shooting stuff for the schools, video paper, whatever.
No, I think it's great advice. So what would be your advice to all of us who are struggling as amateur producers? That would be the golden advice for leveling up. What would be the thing you would think about? You talked about consuming some great content and emulating it. what would be the thing that we would sort of take away? How do we think critically, even as we consume content? What should we be looking for?
Be as objective as you can about your work.
Hmm.
Look at it and say, would that be good enough to get on whatever that program is you're trying to emulate, or whatever that style is you're trying to kind of copy? Would what I'm doing be good enough to get there? And you have to be honest with yourself, and know that, like, okay, I didn't hold that shot long enough, or I didn't get the shots that I needed. Um, that's the first thing. You really have to be objective before you press send and put that out to the masses, because once it's out there, it's out there. So be really critical, and don't be afraid to get opinions from folks who have knowledge of the industry and the business, and putting stuff together. Seek out advice from people in your community, and I'm sure that there are people around them that have more experience than maybe they realize, and get other eyes on it. Because if you get the other eyes that are like friendly and supporting and are looking for you to do the best work that you can do, that will help elevate your game. Because it's the toughest thing to do, is when you're stressing about a deadline, or I have to make this, or I have to get this on. And so often the magic of what we do becomes overwhelming, and it becomes a burden, instead of like allowing us to really flourish. So you're just like, I gotta get it in, I gotta turn it in. No, take your time, slow down, be objective, get some other eyes on it, get a good constructive critique, take that. And one of the things I do too is, like, when I'm sure you've been to conferences and workshops where you'll learn 6,000 things. And I had a news director in San Antonio who, when we would have folks come in for workshops or symposiums or whatever, he would say, I don't want you to learn all 6,000 things. I want you to learn 3 things and do those really well. And so then the next time when that group comes in, or the next time we send you to a workshop or conference, you're going to learn 3 more things. And so down the road, pretty soon, you've got a dozen things that you're really good at. And then that is going to only propel your work, and propel, you being a good storyteller and sharing whatever it is with your audience that you hopes takes your message away from it.
Well, Brett, thank you for doing that for me today, because you've taught me a lot of things, and fortunately I've recorded it, so I've got more than 3 that I can go back through and continue watching, and hopefully get better at more than 3 things, because I've got a lot of them to work on. But I wanted to also offer you the opportunity. You critique students, and what could we do better on this show today? What could I have done better as an interviewer, and in this video?
I give you high grades, man. This is comfortable. This was, you had, your ideas of what you wanted to go to. You sent me kind of a guideline before, and I think that's always great to help. If you're going on something like, I haven't seen social assurance before, but it was nice to kind of get that heads up. Like, okay, good. This is what we're going to talk about. We can do that. So I think, yeah, the planning and the preparation, and then, like in this type of deal, ideally, like if you could say, okay, this is going to be the ideal, we'd have B-roll, a video of, myself or yourself working, or, video of people doing, setting up lighting, or getting sound, or getting that close up. That's how, like, it would be, on a regular broadcast. But if it's something that you're putting together, that you're going to push out, it's not live, you can go back and get those things, and you can do those things. So I think cover video is always one of the most crucial elements. But other than that, man, this is fine. This is fun. Sit down, chop it up,
Yeah.
and bring up old stuff and think about stuff I haven't thought about in a long time, and I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time with us. Maybe next time I can send you a dozen wings, and we'll do this from your house and mine, and we could do it that way.
I have the sauces. And that's one of the weird things now is people like shoot me a note, hey, can I send you our sauce? And I'm like, I'm never going to say somebody no. So I have all the sauces, and it's kind of become my weird party trick now. People are like, hey, let's do wings for the game or whatever, and we'll do the hot ones thing. And so I think I've probably done it the second most amount of times next to Sean, just because, like I said, that's my party trick now. We'll do like a Husker tailgate. We'll do a hot ones tailgate, and before the game, and everybody will run the gamut. So yeah, hey, I'm free. Let's do it. I'm always about having some more wings.
That's awesome. Well, again, thanks for taking the time with us today. Appreciate all you're doing in the community and all you're doing to celebrate young people and pass that along. I think that's it's inspiring. You know, you've helped me think about a lot of those things, so I appreciate that a lot, Brad.
Well, I appreciate the invite, and it's been a good time, man.